If you've been awakened to the two houses of Israel or the Israelite awakening, if you've left your church and you now feel completely alone in your faith journey, this video is for you. You see, you're not crazy, you're not lost, and you're definitely not alone. But isolation is one of the most dangerous traps awakened believers fall into. And today, I'm going to show you exactly how to break free. I'm going to give you 5 practical steps to find your spiritual tribe, whether you live in a major city or the middle of nowhere. But first, we need to talk about why this isolation happens and what the real dangers are. Because if you don't understand the problem, you won't value the solution. So stick with me to the end of this video because it could change everything. Let me tell you how I know this struggle. When I first woke up to the two houses of Israel, and when I realized that the Sabbath wasn't abolished, I was on fire. I thought everyone in my church would see what I was seeing. They didn't. I was called a Judaizer, told I was falling from grace. My pastor sat me down and said I was bringing division. And within the first 6 months, I left that church, and suddenly I had nobody. No Sunday morning community, no small group, no one to call when I had questions about the two houses of Israel, no one to celebrate with. I'd go to Sabbath services alone in my living room, and I'd think, is this it? Is this what awakening to truth actually looks like? Complete isolation? Maybe that's your story too. Maybe you're living it right now. And if you are, I want you to know something. The isolation is real, but it doesn't have to be permanent. There is a way forward, but first, let's talk about why this actually happens to almost everyone who wakes up. So, why does awakening to your identity and the two houses of Israel lead to such profound isolation? There are 5 main reasons, and I guarantee at least 3 of them will apply to you. Reason number 1, and this is hard to hear. Sometimes we create isolation through pride. See, when you first wake up, you see things in Scripture that you never saw before. It's exciting, it's revelatory, and it's very easy to look at everyone still in the church system and think, how do they not see this? They're so blind. I did this. I became almost insufferable. Every conversation turned into a two house of Israel debate. Every Facebook post was correcting somebody's theology, and people started avoiding me. Not because the truth I was sharing was wrong, but because I was sharing it with arrogance instead of love. If everyone around you is pulling away, ask yourself honestly, am I sharing truth or am I being a know-it-all? Because pride will isolate you faster than anything else. Reason number 2, you left the church system. And listen, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have. For many of us, leaving was absolutely necessary. The cognitive dissonance of celebrating pagan holidays while claiming to follow scripture became unbearable. But you see, when you leave church, you lose more than just Sunday services. You lose your entire social structure. The potlucks, the small groups, the people who checked on you when you were sick. See, the church provided community infrastructure, even if the theology was off. And when you walked away, you're starting from scratch. That's not a reason, however, to go back. But it is why the isolation hit so hard. You didn't just change your beliefs, you dismantled your entire community network. Reason number 3, and this one cuts deep: family rejection. Maybe your spouse thinks you've joined a cult. Maybe your parents are praying for your deliverance from legalism. Maybe your adult children won't let you talk about the two houses of Israel around the grandkids. Yeshua said, now catch this, he came to bring division even within families. He wasn't celebrating that reality. He was warning us that it would happen. When you choose truth over tradition, sometimes the people closest to you become the most hostile. And that kind of rejection creates an isolation that goes beyond just not having friends. It's a loneliness that touches the deepest part of your identity. I've watched strong believers almost give up entirely because their own family turned against them. The fourth reason is just geographic location. You live in the middle of nowhere. Maybe you're in rural Montana. Maybe you're in a small southern town where there's a Baptist church on every corner, but not a single fellowship that deals with the two houses of Israel or even Sabbath observance. Geography is real. See, I get messages all the time from people saying, I've searched everywhere and there's nobody near me. And in some cases, that's absolutely true. The awakening is happening, but it's not evenly distributed. Some areas have thriving communities and others have nothing. I do want you to leave a comment about your location, your age, and something about yourself. Leave it in the comments because we're going to be connecting people who are in the same geographic areas for mutual fellowship. So drop that comment. Here's what I want you to hear. Geographic isolation doesn't mean you're stuck. We're going to talk about solutions for this, but first, we need to address the fifth issue. And that is, even when you find other two house of Israel believers or messianic believers, you disagree on major doctrines. You may find a messianic congregation, but they reject the two house teaching. You find a Hebrew roots group, but they're sacred name only, and you're not. You find Sabbath keepers, but they think Yeshua is a false Messiah. Frustrating, isn't it? And then suddenly you realize leaving mainstream Christianity didn't solve the division problem. It just changed the topics that the division was over. And that realization can be crushing. You see, you thought you'd find your people, but instead, you found more arguments. So, those are the 5 reasons that isolation happens. And if you're feeling it right now, I want you to know it's not your fault. This is a normal part of the awakening process, but it's also dangerous. And we need to talk about why. Here we go. Isolation isn't just lonely, it's spiritually dangerous. And I've watched it destroy people who had genuine awakenings. So let me show you the 3 biggest dangers, because if you can see them coming, you can avoid them. Danger number 1 is false teaching. See, when you're isolated, you're desperate for connection, and that desperation makes you an easy target for wolves. I've seen it happen over and over. Someone wakes up, leaves the church, feels completely alone, then they find an online teacher. I'm not talking about me, but they find an online teacher who seems to have all the answers. Finally, someone who understands. Finally, community. But that teacher is teaching flat earth theology, or they're denying Yeshua's deity, or they're claiming that they're the only one with true revelation and everyone else is deceived. And because you're so isolated and hungry for connection, you overlook the red flags. You see, Proverbs tells us that there's safety in a multitude of counselors. When you're isolated, you don't have that safety net. You don't have other believers saying, hey, that doesn't sound right. Let's test this against Scripture. You're on an island, and wolves love to pick off isolated sheep. Danger number 2, your pride becomes unchecked. Remember how I said pride can cause isolation? Well, isolation also feeds pride. It's a vicious cycle. So when you're alone in your theology, there's no one to challenge you. There's no one to say, have you considered this other perspective? No one to humble you when you're wrong. I've been through that a couple of times. And so over time, you become convinced that you're the only one who really understands Scripture. You know, I went through a season where I became so isolated that I started believing that I had insights that nobody else in history had ever seen. See, in my isolation, I thought I was a prophetic voice. And it wasn't until I reconnected with other believers who lovingly challenged my interpretations that I realized how far off I had drifted. Isolation had fed my pride to the point where I was unteachable. And if you stay isolated long enough, the same thing will happen to you. Here's number 3. This is the most heartbreaking. You give up entirely. The isolation becomes so overwhelming that you start thinking, well, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I should just go back to the church. You know, at least I had some friends there, right? So I've had people message me saying, I can't do this anymore. The loneliness is too much. I'm going back to my old church, even though I know the theology is wrong, because at least I won't be alone. I get it. I understand that temptation. But here's what I want you to hear. Yah didn't wake you up to truth just to watch you go back to sleep because it's more comfortable. He didn't call you out of Egypt to send you back when the wilderness got hard. The isolation is real, the loneliness is real, but giving up shouldn't be an option because there is hope. There is a path forward. And I want to spend the next couple of moments encouraging you before I give you the practical steps. Here's the first thing I want you to understand. You're not alone. I know it feels that way. I know you look around your city and think you're the only one. But remember, the awakening is happening everywhere. It's happening in cities and small towns. It's happening across age groups and backgrounds. Right now, as you're watching this, there are people in your state, maybe even in your city, who are on the exact same journey. This is why I want you to drop a comment stating the city that you live in, the town that you live in, the area that you live in. You don't have to give the address. And then later, I want you to come back and look through the comments and identify some of the people that are in the same area and then comment on their comments. And let's build community. They're watching this same video. They're reading the same scriptures. They're feeling the same isolation. You just haven't found each other yet. And that's what we're going to fix today. Because the community that you're looking for, it's closer than you think. Number two, this isolation is temporary. The isolation is temporary. Tell yourself that. Say, self, the isolation is temporary. If you're willing to take action. Now, notice I said, if you're willing to take action. Because here's what won't work. Sitting at home, watching YouTube videos, and hoping community magically appears at your door. I've been doing this long enough to see two types of people. Type 1, they watch videos about isolation, they comment, me too, and then they do nothing. A year later, they're still isolated. Now, the second type, they watch the same videos, but then they take action. They reach out, they post in comments, they search locally, they start their own gatherings, and 6 months later, they're messaging me saying, I found 3 families in my area, and we've been meeting every Sabbath. The difference isn't luck. It's not geography. It's action. The steps that I'm about to give you, they'll work, but only if you actually do them. So I need you to commit right now. You're not just going to watch this video and move on. You're going to pick at least one step and take action this week. Can you commit to that? If so, type I commit in the comments right now. I'm serious. Type it. Because typing it out and saying it out loud, even in a comment, increases the likelihood that you'll actually follow through. I know this is more practical than a lot of my other teachings, But based on the comments that I've been receiving, this is needed. So type 1, commit in the comments. Number 3, imperfect community is better than no community. That's the third truth. This is important. Remember, imperfect community is better than no community. You're not going to find a fellowship that agrees with you on everything. It doesn't exist. If you find a perfect community, don't join. You'll mess it up. Just think about it. We're all imperfect. There are no perfect communities. But you might find a group that's 70% aligned with your theology, maybe 80 if you're really blessed. And you're going to be tempted to say, well, they don't believe exactly what I believe about the two houses, so I'm not going to fellowship with them. Remember, this is also about being a witness, being a light, being a carrier of the work of the Father. So don't do that. Don't let perfectionism keep you isolated. If you find believers who love Yah, who are willing to talk about the two houses of Israel, and they're seeking truth, that's enough to start. You can disagree on secondary issues and still have meaningful community. Think back when you were in church. That's one of the reasons it's so difficult for churches to become self-sustained, because they don't agree on everything. Look at the back and forth on YouTube. Look at the back and forth on the various social media platforms of how believers are just devouring one another because they disagree not on major core beliefs, but on secondary issues. So I'm not saying that you should compromise on core doctrine. If they reject Yeshua as Messiah, if they kind of mock two house of Israel, if they are hostile to your journey, walk away. But if they're just at a different place in their understanding of Ephraim or feast or sacred names, give them some grace, because they're probably going to give you some grace on things you haven't figured out either. Remember, iron sharpens iron, but iron can't sharpen iron if the two pieces never touch. You need community, even imperfect community, to grow. Number 4. You ready? Here's the fourth truth. You might be the pioneer for your area. I know numbers of people commented that they had all of the 7 signs that they're probably Israel. They have, they've been in the awakening for a while. They've known this for years, but they're still isolated. You might be the pioneer for your area. I know this is hard to hear, but it's reality. You might search everywhere and find nobody. And if that's the case, Yah might be calling you to start something. See, every fellowship that exists today started with one person saying, I'm going to gather people. Every church, every messianic congregation, every two-house study group, every Sabbath gathering started with someone who was willing to be first. Maybe that's you. Maybe you're not supposed to find community in your city. Maybe you're supposed to build it. Now, I know that's scary. I know you don't feel qualified, but then again, neither did Moses, neither did Gideon, neither did any of the people that the Father used throughout history. What if the reason you can't find community in your area is because Yah is raising you up to create it? What if there are 10 other people in your city right now watching this same video, waiting for someone to be brave enough to say, let's gather? What if that someone is supposed to be you? Sit with that for a moment. Because in about 2 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how to start your own gathering. Even if you've never done anything like this before. Here are 5 practical steps. All right? You stuck with me this far. You understand the why. You know the dangers. Now you're ready for solutions, right? Okay. So let me give you 5 practical steps you can take this week to break out of isolation and find your spiritual family. These aren't theories. These are strategies that have been proven. They've worked for hundreds of people among 2-house communities, messianic communities, even local churches. I've watched it happen in real time. So grab a pen, take notes, and let's get connected. Number 1, comment your location. Remember what I mentioned a few moments ago? Comment your location below. That's step 1. This is the easiest one. Go down to the comment section right now. If you're on mobile, you can do it while listening. If you're on desktop, make a mental note and share 2 things: your state or your country, and 1 sentence about your journey. That's all. Comment your state and 1 sentence about your journey. That's all you've got to do. I'm personally reading every single comment that comes in on these videos. And when I see 2 people in the same area, I'm going to be connecting you via comments, because this is how it starts. Real community begins with 1 brave comment. You don't have to have, now listen to me, beloved. Listen to me. You know, because I kind of have a Pentecostal, charismatic, prophetic background. You know, I've walked in those camps in the past, so I get it. Don't wait for a vision or a dream in the middle of the night to tell you to start a fellowship. You'll have a witness in your spirit. Yah will let you know if I'm talking to you. And I am talking to you, and you know who I'm talking to because it bears witness. Are you with me? So here's the next thing. You can join online community. There are 2 house observant communities. There are Messianic communities. There are Israelite communities. There's all kind of communities. Here's what to look for in a healthy online fellowship. Okay? Number 1, they encourage questions without shaming you. Did you get that? They encourage questions without shaming you. Number 2, They test everything against scripture, not just tradition. Number three, they welcome different perspectives on non salvation issues. And there's a difference with salvation issues and non salvation issues, but they welcome different perspectives. Four, they're actively helping people to connect locally, not just staying online forever. Online community is not a replacement for in person fellowship. It's a bridge, it's a starting point, but it can sustain you during this wilderness season and help you find your local tribe. I've seen people join these groups feeling completely alone, and within weeks, they're in group chats with believers in their state planning meetups. It works. But you have to take the first step and actually join. You can search locally for fellowships, but do it strategically. Start with messianic congregations, but here's the critical question you need to ask before you attend. Do you teach on the restoration of Ephraim and the two houses of Israel? Some messianic groups embrace this teaching, others reject it entirely. And if you show up to a congregation that thinks Ephraim theology is false doctrine, you're walking right back into the same rejection you left the church to escape. So ask first and save yourself the headache. Also, you can search for two House of Israel fellowships, Hebrew roots groups, Sabbath keepers, even home churches that observe and teach these things. Use Facebook, Google, local bulletin boards. Cast a wide net, and I guarantee you, you'll pull in some fish. Now, you might not find a perfect match. As I stated before, you might find a group that's close with your beliefs, and that's okay. You're looking for people who love Yah, are searching deeper into the reality of the two houses of Israel, and they're seeking truth. You can work with 70%. So don't hold out for 100% when you're trying to find a group to fellowship with. But if they fail the basic test, if they're rejecting the two houses of Israel, if they're mocking your Ephraim Awakening, if they're hostile to your journey, if they're denying Yeshua, walk away. You're looking for iron that sharpens iron, not iron that will crush you. Now, here's step 4. This is the final step. You ready? Okay. Start your own gathering. You say what? Start your own gathering. And before you say I'm not qualified, hear me out. You don't need a theology degree. You don't need to be a teacher. You don't need the title bishop or the title elder. You don't need any of that. You just need to be willing to open your home or to meet at a park. Here's exactly what to do. Post in your local Facebook group, next door, community boards, starting a Sabbath study group in, and then put your city. We're reading through the two houses of Israel, discussing Sabbath, discussing the awakening, and we're building community. All seekers are welcome. Message me for for details. Isn't that simple? And again, I'm going to have this information in the handouts that I'm going to be providing once I finish this particular conversation. But that's it. You might get 0 responses the first week. You might get 1 person the second week. But I've watched people start with 2 people in the living room, and a year later, it's 20 people renting a community center. As the scriptures say, do not despise the day of small beginnings. Now, as I stated, that fellowship meeting guide is going to be linked in the description, and it's going to walk you through exactly what to do week 1, week 2, week 3, etc. What to study, how to structure it, how to handle difficult people. You're not doing this alone. And of course, you can always reach out to me with questions, anything of that nature, point you in the right direction for solid resources. You're not alone. Every major fellowship in history started with one person saying, I'm going to gather people. Think about Yeshua. He started just himself. He was sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and he began to gather people around him, and they fellowshipped. They explored a clearer understanding of the revelatory purposes of Yah. By the time he had finished his work, there were 12. Turned into 120 on the day of Pentecost. Turned into 5,000, 4,000. And the story is never ending. And he is still gathering the lost sheep of the house of Israel, like yourself. But it started with one. You could be that person for your city. So don't wait for Yah to raise up someone else. Yah could be calling you. Here's the last step. Stay discerning. This is critical. Whether you're joining an existing group or starting your own, you need to know the red flags and the green flags. So let me give you some red flags to avoid. First, they claim exclusive revelation that nobody else has. Run. If they think they're the only one or the only group or the only camp, run. Because they're not the only one that has the revelation. Number 2, they attack anyone who disagrees with them. It's another red flag. They attack anyone who disagrees with them. Number 3, they demand loyalty to a leader over loyalty to Scripture. Number 4, they say we're the only true believers and everyone else is deceived. And unfortunately, among awakened Israelites, whether they're Hebrew Israelites, Messianic Israelites, whenever people begin to say nobody else can be included, there's a problem. But let me give you some green flags to look for. Number 1, they encourage you to test everything against the Scriptures. Number 2, they welcome questions without shaming you. Number 3, they point you to Yah, not to themselves, not to their group, not to their tribe. They point you to Yah. Number 4, they celebrate when you grow, even if you eventually outgrow them. Because the student should match, grow, develop, mature to be like their instructors. See? That's why we're being conformed to the image of Messiah. So test everything against Scripture. Welcome questions without shame. Point to Yah, not themselves, and they celebrate your growth. Those are green flags. You want to go with that. Look for the green. Avoid the red. You have a driver's license? What do you do when you see a green light? You go forward. What do you do when you see a red light? You put the brakes on. Why don't we do that in our faith journey? If you're starting your own group, then be the green flags for people. Create the community that you wish you had when you first woke up. So let's recap, because I want to make sure you remember these 5 steps. Step 1, comment your location below right now. State or country, 1 sentence about your journey. Step 2, join online 2-house or Messianic or Awaken Israelite communities. It's a lot to choose from. Step 3, search locally for those types of congregations. Ask about 2-house understandings before you attend. 4, start your own gathering. Download the free fellowship guide meeting that's in the description. Step 5, stay discerning. Look for green flags and avoid red flags. Now here's my challenge. Don't just watch this video and move on. Pick one of those 5 steps and do it this week. Not next month, not when you feel ready, not when the Spirit moves you. Do it this week. Because here's the truth. The isolation that you're feeling right now, it will still be there next month if you don't take action. But if you take 1 step this week, you could be in a completely different place 6 months from now. But remember, it starts with 1 step. So which step are you going to take?